Is there statistics behind the vast difference in available donors?
Black person had a 29% chance of finding their match on the registry. The Caucasian person had a 79% chance. We as Hispanics fell right in the middle at 48%. That's unacceptable as far as I'm concerned.
What is the difference between the ethnicity of the Hispanic individual versus the Caucasian individual that seems to have more of a sense of urgency?
Imagine that person that you love needs that transplant. What would you do? Anything. Anything. And all we're asking for you to do is potentially be a match for somebody. Just say yes.
Now, it's no laughing matter, because it's no laughing matter until it happens to you.
We need to take action now, today.
Welcome to the Bedrock Way podcast, where we're changing the habits of yesterday by creating the new healthcare reality of tomorrow. And today, Jonathan, we have a very special treat for our listeners and for me. My guest today actually went through some personal turmoil that got her galvanized to do what she does now. And she's someone who, when you hear her story, when you hear her cause, when you hear her mission, when you hear what gets her out of bed, is a mission and a vision that is very close to her heart. And my guest today is the amazing Marilyn Morales, a board-certified holistic registered nurse, who also is the clinical. I'll let her introduce herself, and I'll do her bio. But I really wanted to take an opportunity to kind of preamble this conversation. And she's going to talk about the value of being able to be a selfless healthcare participant in an area that you might not believe it. Some of us donate blood, right, in the event that we need it, or in the event that one of our family members or, God forbid, a loved one needs it. Or maybe not. Maybe it's just anyone, right? Because we have the humanized aspect of wanting to be beneficent and wanting to help others. But there's another one. There's another donation that is rare, but quite frankly is just as necessary, and that's bone marrow. And bone marrow donations, bone marrow transplants, and bone marrow needs continue to increase, especially with some rare diseases and some rare instances that Marilyn will go into detail. The title of our podcast today is Courage and Chaos, a Nurse's Legacy of Love. Wow, it gives me chills just to read it. So without further ado, welcome to the Bedrock Way podcast, Marilyn Morales.
Thank you so much for having me here today.
And for what I understand, Marilyn, is you have your own podcast. So you are a veteran. This is easy for you to get on a microphone and just talk to the world about what you do, how you do it, but most importantly, why you do it.
Our stories are always important, right? So, and as a podcast host myself, my purpose is for sharing the everyday person's story. How do we get through things? My own story started in New York City. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. I became a nurse at the age of 17 years old, went to Clara Barton High School, grew up in the Marcy Projects of Brooklyn.
That's where Jay-Z came from.
That's right. Actually, he was in school at the same time I was in school. We went to the same school.
Really?
Right, but we didn't know each other.
Gotcha.
But yeah, we were there at the same time. We're around the same age.
One of the things that I think I loved about the podcast and I loved about this platform is the ability to know people's stories. And again, it's something that you don't get in the networking events, right? You don't get in a day-to-day knowing someone. But when you truly look into someone's spirit and soul and heart and understand that their mission is just more than a paycheck, I love that. I love that because that's what adds to someone's authenticity. And it's I think what I love the most. I know when I met you at the healthcare conference was the first time that we met. And from the get-go, it was evident that you were different. And it was evident that you had this authentic, genuine aura about you. And I think I told you at the event. And it was, I feel like I was in the presence of someone who was special, and I still feel the same way. Marilyn Morales is a seasoned, board-certified holistic registered nurse with over 3 decades of experience in the healthcare field. She wears multiple hats, serving as the host of the captivating show Unscripted with Marilyn Morales. Hopefully, I get an invite and I'm good enough to be part of your podcast. It's available on YouTube and CTF TV. In January 2023, Marilyn added author to her impressive list of achievements, launching her book titled When the Answer is No, Finding Purpose Through Pain. This journey delves into Marilyn's personal experiences with PTSD, following her involvement in 9/11 in New York and the profound grief she faced after losing her daughter Isabella to a rare form of leukemia. Beyond her roles as a nurse and author, Marilyn, in her spare time, is a dedicated holistic wellness advisor and speaker. Her passion lies in educating others on healing and moving forward from emotional traumas like grief and PTSD, using holistic methods as a guiding light. I didn't know that.
Yes.
Wow. That's amazing. At the helm of Izzy's Legacy, Inc., Marilyn serves as president for this nonprofit organization. Izzy's Legacy is on a mission to enhance diversity and representation in the MDP Marrow Registry through educational initiatives. What does NMDP stand for?
Well, it used to be the National Marrow Donor Program. So Be The Match has gone back to what people originally knew. So they're formally known as NMDP. But because it used to stand for the National Marrow Donor Program, but they are international now.
Gotcha. Additionally, the organization provides crucial financial support to individuals on their cancer journey, embodying Marilyn's commitment to making a positive impact in the healthcare community. So you help individuals who are afflicted with these types of rare diseases that may need marrow transplants or are on the waiting list of bone marrow. Wow, that's impressive. In addition to her impactful roles, Marilyn is the co-owner of the Gathering Haven, an organization dedicated to empowering individuals across all levels of being through holistic wellness. I love the word holistic being shown in multiple times on your bio. You know why? Because we become so unilateral in the way that we provide healthcare. Someone told me the other day a surgeon can't even manage blood pressure. You know, there are surgeons who can't even detect AFib in an EKG. And it's amazing that as a nurse, you become so well-rounded. I love that. Gathering Haven is a mission to foster a community that uplifts physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being, creating an environment where individuals can unlock their full potential and embrace a life of vitality and purpose. Man, you're creating a great legacy. I love this. But I think a good area for us to start is for you to tell us about Izzy's legacy. Let us know this is, again, a very special mission for you that really takes you back to your daughter, and you lost her at a very young age. And for most people, that would be something that would be catastrophic, not only in the event, but in the aftermath of that event. And you've used it as a way to almost undo your harm for others, which is, again, a very selfless thing, and one of the things I admire about you. So tell my audience, tell our listeners the thinking behind Izzy's legacy and why this should be a call to action to everyone on, you know, the responsibility that we have to potentially be, again, not just participants, or I should say, not just spectators on the sidelines, but really active participants to prevent future family members or other family members to go through the trauma that you went through.
So finding purpose through pain is the reason why Izzy's legacy was created. This is many years in the making. Isabella was born in 2007, was diagnosed at the age of 7 months old with this rare leukemia, one that could not be treated by chemotherapy. So as a nurse myself, I didn't even know that something like that existed. And when I heard the word leukemia, I said, okay, we got this. We can do this. There's medicine out there. And then the next words from the physicians were, no, this is not that kind, right? No chemotherapy can treat it. It can keep it at bay, but it's not going to save her life. The only way to do that, because it is a rare leukemia, is a bone marrow transplant. So they looked at my 2 other children and they said, these 2 are her best chance. right? Because they're her siblings, same mom, same dad. Let's get them tested right away, because then we can get her transplant scheduled. So when they did test them both, they came back heartbreakingly half matches for her, as were her father and I. And that was just not good enough for the transplant that she needed, right? So they then said to us, well, you now have to search outside of your family and find someone who will match your daughter. And that's going to be really difficult because you are Hispanic and there's not a presence of Hispanics on this registry. So they immediately encouraged us to get on television, get into the newspaper, and do anything that we could to find this match. So we did. We did everything the doctors told us to do. I also, as a nurse, kept all her labs. So every time a lab was done, I collected it because I was trying to make sense of everything. Imagine being a medical professional and you can't do nothing. You can't do anything for your child. So I took this information, and at that time, the National Marrow Donor Program, you could go on to the website. There was a website that you could go on and you could enter this information, and it would tell you if you had matches out there. It wouldn't tell you who, it wouldn't tell you where, but it would give you a number. So I went ahead and entered all of our information, not just Isabella, but all of us. I found that she had some matches that were out there, and so did my husband. But when I put mine in, there was nobody there. When I put my other 2 children in, there was no one for them either. I looked at that, I called my husband over and I said, oh my God, she was the only one that even stood a chance at fighting this disease. Had it been me, had it been the other 2, there was nobody there for us. So I said, no matter what happens with her, we have to continue to talk about this.
Just so the listeners can keep up with this story, because this I want to make sure that we don't glare over the value of the time frame, because what you're describing, this is, you had to act fast. You were against the clock. You know, what did the doctors, when they told you that the leukemia was unfortunately unable to be managed with traditional methods such as chemotherapy, you knew that you were under the gun, right? You knew that you needed to act fast. So what you're describing, tell me the time frame. Tell me the time frame from when you had to really start to the time frame where you knew that time was running out. I just want to get a sense of that. Was it 2 months, 3 months, or what? Did you have to act quick?
Immediately. So she was diagnosed in October. Immediately we were told this information, especially after receiving the results of my other 2 children's labs. So they said, we have to get out there. And because they knew that there was not a presence of Latin people on that registry, we knew that we had to do things faster and get out there, because to organize a drive, to organize people together, to actually join a registry takes time. So the plan was to get her until she was 2 years old. She was 7 months old. We have until she's 2 at the time. They said, so we have to act now because this takes a lot of time. And just because you have a drive doesn't mean you find someone.
Right. So at 7 months, you needed to find the match, and then the match needed to happen at 2 years old?
They were hoping to get her until that time.
Got it.
But things changed. So it showed that the cancer was progressing and she needed it now. She couldn't wait.
Got it. So initially there was that opportunity for her to have, wait till 2 years and then potentially be, again, we had the time. And then how quickly did you find out from 7 months that you didn't have till 2?
December. 2 months,
2 months
later.
Wow.
2 months later, things are changing. We need to move faster. And, time is of the essence. We don't think we're going to be able to make it past her being a year old. So let's do everything possible, which we did. Interestingly, we did find a donor for her. She had several. Like I said, there were some that were on there. They initially said 4 people turned out to be a match that we believe are close enough to match your daughter. Again, this is volunteer. So only 2 of them came forward to say, yes, I will, and start doing the blood work that's necessary to make sure that they're healthy and that they actually matched her. So 2 out of the 4 came forward and did everything quickly. Out of those 2, one of them was chosen. This gentleman, who I now know, his name is Mike Hensley. He allows me to say his name, out of Oklahoma, joined at the time that we started our search. So he wasn't on the registry. He attended a drive for the daughter of a coworker who was having a drive in Oklahoma for his place of employment. And he was hoping to match that little girl who also had leukemia, but ended up matching a little Puerto Rican girl in New Jersey.
Wow.
Yeah.
So essentially the person who matched was not someone who originally was revealed when you did the initial search.
No.
When you said that you started looking for other donors because she was the only one that stood a chance, that mission to make sure that people became aware of the need to provide donorship, you were going to do that regardless.
Regardless, we continued. Even though we had heard that there were matches, it doesn't mean that they would go through with it. It's volunteer.
Can you take the listeners through the process again? I think, and I'm just telling you, I'm in the medical space. I'm a healthcare provider, and you tell me bone marrow donor, that scares me.
Yes.
What is the process?
Scares a lot of people.
Right? So you tell me bone marrow, all I can think of is that's invasive, that is painful, I don't want it, go away, unless I need to, right? But just like everything else, it doesn't become a need until it hits close to home. So tell me, what does it entail? Because I think one of the biggest things that we can accomplish today, Marilyn, is to eliminate, neutralize, and hopefully nullify the stigma behind being a bone marrow donor. Because I will tell you, I know there are a lot of listeners out there who this is something that is so painful, so invasive, and so rare that it's not going to affect me. But it will, right? Because even though the statistics might say that this is rare, 1 in thousands, when it's your daughter, it's 1 of 1.
So a stem cell transplant, which is what we call it now, because in 90% of the cases, you do not have to go into the bone to extract the marrow any longer.
That's important.
It is. So it's peripheral blood now. So it is as easy as donating platelets. There's no longer having to go under anesthesia. There is no hospitalization required, an overnight hospitalization. A couple of hours hooked up to like giving blood is all that is required in 90% of the cases.
So here, I just basically Googled a site called Be The Match, and it says just to go over the process of being a donor, doctors use needles to withdraw the liquid marrow, where the body's blood-forming cells are made, from both sides of the back of your pelvic bone. You're given anesthesia. You feel no pain during the donation, and after donation, your liquid marrow is transported to the patient's location for transplant.
So that's the bone marrow transplant. That's used 10% of the time.
Beautiful. And then it says that it's usually it's no pain during the collection procedure.
That's correct.
So once that happens, so if that's the bone marrow, we'll get into the stem cells. That's the bone marrow. So how is that then? Is there a time frame that needs to be given to the recipient?
Immediately. So it's frozen and then it's transported to wherever the recipient lives.
Gotcha. So tell me the difference. So tell me what's done 90% of the times.
Peripheral blood. That is just like donating. When you go to donate blood, you're hooked up to, for the regular person, like an IV, right? So it's taken that way. So the blood, platelets, stem cells, all of that is removed. The stem cells are then harvested. The rest of your blood is returned to you.
To my listeners, tell them the difference. So a stem cell transplant uses stem cells from your bloodstream or a donor's bloodstream. It's also called a peripheral blood stem cell transplant. A bone marrow transplant uses stem cells from your bone marrow or a donor's bone marrow. Stem cell transplants are the most common type of transplants. Beautiful. And again, both of them with modern technology are not painful. And again, why is there a stigma that bone marrow or stem cell are so painful?
Because it used to be many years ago, and that's what people remember.
So I think that we need to really, again, provide a level of education. I think that this podcast hopefully will do that. That for those of you who, again, fit the model, I know for you mentioned Hispanic. So the fact that she was Hispanic, that also affected the match, right? The potential match.
Correct. Because
So tell me about that. How the ethnicity affects the availability of a match.
things that are in our body, we inherit. So when we talk about the way that we look, we inherit that from our parents. Well, down to our blood types and everything, all the tissues in our body, they're all genetically inherited. So your best chance for finding somebody that's going to have similar proteins in your body, similar makeup, is going to come from somebody from your similar genetic background. And that's where being Hispanic comes into play, being African American comes into play, or being Caucasian, because we're going to carry those proteins. We're going to have similar proteins within our bodies.
So there's something called genomics and biomarker research, right? Which is what a lot of medical professionals are using to provide personalized medicine. So it would seem that if we are able to get our genomic results, we would be able to know who and how we would be able to be a match for someone else. Or is that not a genetic match? I'm just trying to make sure that we augment the opportunity and the availability of what seems to be something that's rare. Because, again, I think if we simplify it for people,
Right.
people engage and embrace, especially in this world where people pay attention to things 10, 20, 30, 40 seconds. I just want to make sure that we're able to kind of spoon feed it to people in a way that they're like, you know what? I want to be an advocate, because I'll tell you myself, as we're talking, I'm saying to myself, I need to do this, right? Because if I can potentially have the power to save someone's life, I want to be able to capitalize on that. Have you seen that being a donor, is this something that is difficult to get people to do it? Or is this something that we're getting a lot of people wanting to be donors?
No, it's still difficult to
Why?
get them to do it. And because of the myths still associated
Gotcha.
with the uncomfortable, painful process that it used to be. Is there downtime, right? So the regular person is concerned about if they have to miss work, right? What is that going to do for their family, right? If something happens to them, if there's a complication to this, and they potentially can't work, what is that going to do to their income and their family? So those are the questions that I know that when I go out to do drives, I get asked.
And are you being successful in getting people to join once you educate them? It seems like a pretty no-brainer, right?
It used to be where in order to join, you had to take blood, right? Many, many years ago, they took your blood to see if you were a match. Now it's as simple as a swab of your cheek, a Q-tip. You swab the inside of your cheek, 10 seconds, that's it.
I don't want to forget about the tragedy here, which is losing a daughter, right? And to me, it's, when you talk about the grief and the shock, the confusion, the disbelief, the denial that we go through when we lose a loved one, and how you recover from that, and how quickly did you re-engage in your mission? Because it seemed like you started the mission before she passed. Walk us through that, because again, you talk about, you're trying to enhance diversity, but I want to talk about the adversity that you were able to overcome. And again, you are such a strong proponent of this. What continues to keep you going after so many years?
So that was very interesting, because the idea that we couldn't keep this information to ourselves began with Isabella. And even though our family did drives on a small scale since her passing, it didn't really come to the forefront until about a year ago. Actually, it was 2 years ago in January, where my daughter, who was 9 years old at the time, Gabrielle Morales, works for NMDP.
What?
Now, full circle for my daughter, yes. So she works for them, and she was the person who helps people find their matches. She shared with me the story of a little girl, Hispanic, 12 years old, who had been searching for 6 years. So she was helping this mother with a drive to find a match for her daughter. She didn't have cancer, but she had a condition where she required a transplant. And she was having a similar drive for 2 little girls who had leukemia. They were Caucasian. She had drives for the 2 of them the same week. Thousands of people showed up for the drives for the 2 little girls that were Caucasian. 20 people showed up for the drive for the little Hispanic girl. So that mother says to my daughter, Why does my child not matter? Why does no one show up for my child? My daughter couldn't answer her. And so she came home and said, I don't know what to do. And it broke my heart. And I said, I know what that mother's feeling.
Sure.
And I'm going to do something. I said, I don't know what that something is or what that looks like, but mom's going to do something. And we're going to change this around because we have to do something different in order to have a different outcome.
Love that. So what is, wow, now is there statistics behind the vast difference in available donors? I guess, listen, I'm Hispanic origin. We're stubborn people that don't go to the doctor and we don't get sick, and bone marrow, that's the only things that you see in the movies. So what is it about the ethnic population? Again, I know we both share that. I can tell you, I have the most stubborn parents and grandparents. They will laugh at this, and it's no laughing matter, because there's no laughing matter until it happens to you.
Exactly what I say all the time. Don't wait until you're on the other side of this microphone to then start worrying about it. We need to take action now, today.
What is the difference between the ethnicity of the Hispanic individual versus the Caucasian individual that seems to have more of a sense of urgency in this? Because that's honestly something that we need to kind of just, figure out. And that's really the missing link here, right? Is it, do we have bad advocacy on our side? There has to be a way for us to get the word out there. This seems to have increased its traction the last 2 years. And I love the story that you're helping your daughter. But what avenues are we using to get the word out there more for the Hispanic population? And quite frankly, is it the same way with blacks? Is there
it's
a
actually
breakdown?
Worse
with blacks.
Worse with blacks,
Wow.
yeah, absolutely. If we were going to look at percentages, and up until last year, NMDP was using percentages, the black person had a 29% chance of finding their match on the registry. The Caucasian person had a 79% chance. We as Hispanics fell right in the middle at 48%. That's unacceptable as far as I'm concerned.
What's the ideal number to get? Obviously 100%, right?
100%. No one's safe right now. As you can see, the highest is at 79%, right?
Wow.
Nobody's safe. Those little girls, and by the way, with that story with my daughter, they didn't find a match. Even though thousands of people showed up, none of them were a match for her.
Wow.
For them. Their mother ended up having to donate. And she was only a half match. So you're hoping for a higher match so that you have less side effects from the transplant. There's a rejection that can happen with transplants. So the closer the match, the less likely that you're going to reject that transplant. Sure. There was nobody for them either. So I said that no one is safe. No one is safe. And when you talk about somebody who's of mixed ethnicity, we talk blacks, Hispanics, white, right? The percentage is less than that.
Wow.
And who isn't mixed these days? Who doesn't have somebody mixed in their family? So imagine if it was them. So when I talk to people, I said, imagine that person. Imagine that person that you love needs that transplant. What would you do? Anything. Anything. And all we're asking for you to do is potentially be a match for somebody. Just say yes.
Listen, it's the reason we buy car insurance. There are reasons we buy life insurance. There's a reason that we go to the dentist. You have to prepare for tomorrow because we don't know what tomorrow brings. And I think this negligence is something that, we really have to make sure that we address. So let's go back to the specific illness. I know that you mentioned it in the book. It's a long name that I'm sure you pronounce perfectly. Let's go through that because you never know. A listener either has dealt with it, is dealing with it, or will deal with it. And I can probably predict positively and to high accuracy that you probably know everything about the disease at this point in time, especially with the nursing background. So can we talk about that specific disease and, has that rear its ugly head ever again for you to be able to be in a position to help someone that was in your position potentially or will be in that position?
So it was called JMML, Juvenile Myelomonocytic Leukemia. And because it's so rare, I never ran into anyone that had it. But that's what these two little girls, that's a part of this story, that's exactly what they had. And it is a leukemia that is seen in small children. That's why it's called juvenile. Sure. So 3 years and under is where you will find this diagnosis. It's slow moving usually, not in my daughter's case, but it is a slow moving cancer. Still to this day, the stem cell transplant is the leading treatment for it. So there still is no chemotherapy that will treat it.
And how can our listeners get their butts off the couch and go donate stem cell, bone marrow, whatever they need to do, and where?
And let me tell you, they don't have to get their butts off the couch, because you can register from home. That kit can come to your home. You swab, like I mentioned, 10 seconds each side of the inside of your cheek. It's a postage paid envelope. You mail it right back in. Boom, you're on the registry.
And where do they get that? Where do they get that?
They can get it right on my website, izzyslegacyinc.org.
So for the listeners out there, as you will see on our screen, you'll see the link to get yourself, as Marilyn said, you don't even have to get your butt off the couch. It comes to your home. So the convenience couldn't be better. So let's switch gears again into what are you doing today professionally? Because I know you're doing a lot of things, that are selfless, right? That help others. What are you doing today? What brings you satisfaction as a nurse? I know you're part of a very large conglomerate that, and you have a very large responsibility over seniors. Tell our listeners that there's so much more to Marilyn that actually wasn't even given justice in that bio.
So I currently am a regional director of clinical services for Brandywine Living, an assisted living organization. My passion is teaching the nurses how to look at their residents in a holistic manner, how to look at them beyond the diagnoses of all the comorbidities that they come into us with, heart conditions, lung conditions, all of that. They're not just a diagnosis, they're a whole person. So finding ways outside of traditional medicine to treat them. We have a lot of dementia. So I'm sure you're familiar with the assisted living communities. We have a lot of dementia. And a lot of times that comes with behaviors, right? So what can we do aside from giving a pill to be able to treat them, to bring them some peace, to lower that anxiety? So my passion is doing that.
I love the word holistic. Holistic is one of my favorite words. And I will tell you, holistic to me means you treat the person. You don't treat a body part. You don't treat a diagnosis. You don't treat what you think the person needs. You treat what the person wants and at time what makes the person's whole. We just talked about it this morning. There's especially in senior housing, especially in nursing, there has been such a transactional aspect to the patient and nurse relationship or the patient practitioner relationship. And what I mean is that you come, you give a pill, and you leave. There's no affinity being created. There's no reality where you're joining the patient, to your point of memory care. There's no communication, and there's really no trust that evolves. So how are you teaching? And again, we're seeing the most highly acute resident in the history of our industry. And we always say the pandemic gave us an inheritance of the worst silver tsunami that we're ever going to experience, right? Where we're getting 10,000 new customers every single day till, I think, 10 years from now. So how are we teaching that current population, which is a demographic clash, where we're taking care of the post-depression traditionalist, and it's being taken care of Gen X or the millennial, right? Millennial, not Gen X. We're Gen X millennials that don't really share in their values. So how do we how do you teach the current people to make sure that the seniors are being taken care of, especially those that don't have the same values, the same customs? Because I'm going to bring this full circle to Izzy's legacy.
by teaching them to take care of themselves and what's important to them, how they feel. When your energy is such that you bring peace, then you will bring peace to the people that you're treating.
That approach that is so unique that you use in teaching your team, that was garnished by going through the aftermath of Izzy, because you were able to teach others. Because think about dementia. Those family members have lost that family member, right? They're talking to someone who they no longer recognize, and they no longer recognize them. And I always say that one of the most impactful things that family members go through in senior housing is seeing their heroes become strangers, and seeing people that they used to idolize become, again, isolated and become just a shell of themselves. And for you to empower the team to be able to do that, it's what you had to be. You had to do, right? You had to basically say, hey, I've been given a reality. That now I have to deal with. And you're telling your team, you need to join their reality so you can help their family deal with theirs. So you're the nurse that you are by going through that. And I always say, like, we go through these adverse experiences, as we grow. And I don't think anyone can measure the impact of losing a loved one, let alone someone less than 1 year old. But I got to tell you, you are doing Izzy a tremendous amount of justice. And I think you're using that experience as a way to really be transformative with other people. I've always said, Marilyn, when you change yourself, you just change yourself. When you change other people, you change the world. And it's very easy for us to go through tragedies and to go through traumas and internalize and kind of become isolated and hermit ourselves. It's very different to actually use that as a way to out yourself. And you're doing that really well. What do you think gives you that continued determination? Because that's not normal, right? It's not normal to see such a confident woman that year after year, and especially after your daughter, right, is now dealing with it, not from your perspective, but she's feeling the anguish of others. So for you to now carry that, I'm going to help her so she doesn't feel selfless like I did. So that, to me, what gives you that fire to continue to do this day after day, writing books, very demanding job, but continuing to, create legacy, be a wellness advisor when we live in an age where people are trying to do less and less, but you're trying to do more and more.
I owe that all to my mother, my grandmother, and all the mothers before them. I say all the time, it's in my DNA. I come from a long line of strong women who don't take things sitting down. So when this happened to me, I didn't want to be a nurse. The first thing I did was try to find a different kind of a job. I actually went into home health, became a home health nurse to try to get away from dealing with the C word that I was finding with my patients every day. But I didn't find that. I find that I was now dealing with them one-on-one. So I said, Isabella would not recognize the mother that I became. The woman that I became right after losing her was not the mother that she knew.
Wow. It's incredible to see how she changed you. And she changed you to make you an agent of change for others. That's pretty cool. Tell me how you grew up, because I want to hear about, a long line of strong mothers. Tell me your household. Tell me your siblings. I'm always so curious to see and find out the history of our guests, because, again, we are products of our youth and the way that we were brought up. And, again, being a product of 3 siblings, living in a very crazy Hispanic household, I wouldn't be who I was or who I am if I didn't have that upbringing. So tell me about you.
I'm the third of 4 children. First daughter. I have 2 older brothers, a younger sister. First generation, born in New York. My parents came from Puerto Rico, settled in the projects. of Brooklyn and tried to give us a better life. They did give us a better life. And, they taught us how to treat others. They taught us respect. They taught us to never give up and to do better than they did so that, we would have a different life than they did. Education was number one that my mother taught us. That no matter what, we had to finish school. No matter what, you had to strive for better. And that we had to do better than the average person because we were of Hispanic background.
Man, you're giving me chills. You gave me chills because that's what it's all about. I call that having a lion mentality, right? We always say, lions, when the lion looks at an elephant, what does an elephant do? An elephant runs. A lion hunts, right? Because the lion is not the biggest, it's not the smartest, it's not the fastest, but it's the toughest. And in life, you have to be the toughest, and you have to become unstoppable, and you have to be consistent. You have to be resilient. And it's these transformative experiences that make you that unstoppable. And I have two girls, Marilyn, and I tell them all the time, life doesn't get any easier. And I think we go through life and people say, man, it's always something, right? You hear that a lot. Hey, it's always something. It's the washer. It's the dryer. It's my heater. It's this. It's always going to be something until your name or until your body is adorned by a tombstone and there's a date when you were born, a date when you unfortunately passed, and there's that dash in the middle that matters, right? That's what matters, the dash in the middle. And I'm looking at your bio, I'm looking at the way you grew up, I'm looking at your story, and you are making that dash so important in the Marilyn Morales story. So what is next for Marilyn Morales? What is something that you're working on right now besides everything else? But where do you see that? Where do you see at the? We talk about it all the time here, Marilyn. We're looking to make sure that we leave healthcare better than we entered it, which is essentially leaving the world better than we entered it. We also believe that the best days of healthcare are still ahead of us. And we are going to do that because we believe that, the best days of healthcare are not behind us, like some people tend to believe. Some people tend to believe that we peaked already. No, absolutely not. There's such much more to do for us. What is there still to do for Marilyn? What you have done, Marilyn, is probably enough lives for 4 or 5 people. But I'm suspecting that you're looking to do a lot more. What is that? Tell my audience, because I do think that there is a tremendous amount of leadership qualities about you that you can teach the prospective nurse and that you can just teach the prospective female that is looking out there to do more, fight more, get more, but sometimes doesn't know where to start.
Because it is prevention. It is before you become ill, you have to change how you are so that you don't become ill. And more people are understanding that concept. Treatment begins before the illness.
So when treatment begins before the illness, right, we call that proactive medicine. We call that the opportunity for us not to perpetuate the all illness-driven reactive model when we see patients when they're sick, so they just get sicker. We got to see them when they're well, so they stay well. But I don't think anybody's able to be proactive in managing or treating PTSD. Right? Mental health continues to be such a massive, massive aspect of healthcare. It is the 4th leading trend of healthcare in 2024. It's underserved. Behavioral therapy, mental therapy, the ability for us to be able to manage depression, anxiety, our feelings, emotional intelligence, the feelings of others. And unfortunately, a lot of us succumb to those feelings. And while the normal allopathic medicine or osteopathic medicine that allows us to, like you said, proactively identify factors that can allow us to implement interventions and prevent decline, trauma, grief, at least for PTSD, can never be planned for, right? Something that you have to deal after the fact. So let's talk about that. I want to know how you have been dealing with PTSD, something that you went through during 9/11, and that I'm sure was compounded by Izzy's situation.
And continues, because COVID-19, many of us in healthcare suffered from PTSD after that. We were treating people, we didn't know what we were treating. We were seeing our patients dying in record numbers. So flashbacks from all of that, I think a lot of us are still dealing with. That is PTSD. That is going through a trauma that we had never gone through before and not knowing how to deal with what we're seeing and experiencing. So if never before, right now is so important to be able to have the tools necessary so that when these things come up, you know how to deal with them. It's having tools in the toolbox.
And what are some of those tools to have?
So for me, and the things that I teach are meditation, aromatherapy, Reiki, music, walking in nature. It's whatever speaks to you, whatever brings you peace. Identify that. Having a good support system, finding all the people that surround you, that if something comes up for you, that you can call them and they can help you through whatever episode you're going through.
I love meditation. I love mindfulness. I love the ability for us to get and really embrace nature. I love the fact that our bodies are so powerful, and we have no idea how powerful they really are. And I agree with you, Marilyn. A support system is so important. A support system is so important because of the fact that there are times that when we can't lift ourselves, others lift us up. Tell me about your support system that you currently have right now.
I have several. I'm fortunate to have several, whether it's my immediate family, my coworkers, someone who has gone through a similar situation like myself. I talk about in my book, as I was writing my book, things were coming up. I was getting emotional. I was starting to have flashbacks of 9/11 as I was writing about that particular chapter. But I knew someone who had gone through it with me. I identified that person as my support person, and I called her. I put the book away, and I was like, I'm having flashbacks. I'm feeling this way. She knew exactly what I was going through and was able to talk me down to where I could continue to write.
Wow. Now, do you still go through those episodes now? Do they and what transpires during those episodes? Do you put yourself back in the situation of 9/11? Does it put you back into, woulda, coulda, shoulda, that we always tend to be as human beings, kind of replay it and try to relive it? Like, walk us through that, because again, it's so hard, just like everything else, it's so hard to understanding unless you live through it. But then when you hear from someone else's mind, it's so easy to understand and relate to it. When you see heinous things out there, you're unable to identify or empathize with it because, again, it doesn't hit close to home. Right. But that's something that when I see you and I'm like, wow, so here we are 23 years removed almost from 9/11, but it's still something that afflicts you potentially daily. But yet you're able to get up, use that as almost an armor, and that allows you to go out there and fight. So what are some of the things, and are there triggers, that elicit these responses?
Right. So the obvious one is an anniversary, right? So when anniversaries come up, that's going to be a trigger, especially for 9/11, because it's on television, it's everywhere. But it could be as simple as a loud noise. You just never know when it's going to happen. And I didn't know this until I went through it myself. When you talk about veterans of war and they hear a loud noise, they respond that way because it takes them right back, right? But until you go through it yourself, and I went through it myself, where a loud bang, when the plane initially hit that first tower. Now I'm from New York City. We hear loud noises all the time, right? So that initial bang, I thought was a truck. You know how the trucks, they back up and they make this loud noise? That's what I thought it was, right? And I was like, oh my God, what was that? And I felt the building shake, so I thought it was a truck right outside, because you feel that vibration. And it actually was a plane hitting. So the next time I feel that or a truck makes that noise, it takes my mind right back to it. And I'll remember where I was. And I remember when I first heard the person run into the building to say, hey, a plane just hit the Trade Center. Oh my God, those poor people. Until it hit the second time. And we knew that it was not an accident.
It's amazing for me to see the resilience of the human spirit and the resilience. We had a 9/11 survivor here earlier this year, and he sat on your chair and he talked about and the day, and he remembered the day so perfectly, so vividly.
So do I.
And it was, I mean, he chronicled, Marilyn, every step of the journey. And again, the visceral emotional response that he gave us, it almost took me into his world, and I almost felt like I was there with him because it was that powerful of a visceral response that we had. And I do think that everyone who went through the 9/11 situation, PTSD, every survivor, Marilyn, I feel like you guys are almost angels on earth, because you guys are giving people the glimpse of what tragedy can do, but also the silver lining in tragedy, meaning that when you choose to not let that define you, you don't have a stronger human being than that. And he was so again, so strong, but wasn't afraid to show his weakness. So for you, is when the emotions overwhelm you in this forum, are you someone who lets out the emotions, or are you someone who tends to say, wait, let me redirect myself? Because that's a question I asked him. And he said that for him, it's therapeutic to kind of just let the emotions, and even his spouse understands that. Because again, back to the Hispanic background,
right,
especially as females, we're not supposed to show weakness. We're supposed to be strong. So how is that something that for you, you're able to manage?
So for years, I did the diversion, right? I just thought of something else, did something else, shake yourself out of it and keep moving. Don't talk about it. So then I had to change that because that wasn't working, right? And I had to talk about, this is how I feel. It was fear. Fear drives many things. And fear is what was driving me. Fear of the unknown. Fear of that this could happen at any time. On September 10th, we were a different world. We were untouchable, especially those of us from New York. You're from New York yourself, right? Sure. How are we? We feel we're untouchable until September 11th.
It's a day that I always tell people, Marilyn, it's a day that we all lost our innocence as a nation. It's a day that it's almost like the veil was pulled up, and we saw the terrible things about life and what other humans can do to other humans. Things that, again, sometimes we see in the news that someone has committed a very, heinous crime on another individual, and you say to yourself, how can someone do that? And if you knew why or how, or if you identified with that, you'd be just as sick as that person. So it's tough for us to do that. And that's the way I feel about 9/11. I'm like, oh my God, like, we have people that went through that, endure that, but they're still here dealing with that pain, but still creating the amazing things that you're creating. That I think is what shocks me. It does shock me. And some people take it for granted. I'll give you another example. Last week I was at Starbucks, and I love what I do. Love what I do. Passion every day to me is a gift, not because they call it the present, but because I love what I have the privilege to do here at Bedrock. And I was at Starbucks. It was Thursday, and I sat next to an individual who was 10 years younger. He was 34, and he had just come back from the military. And he saw how dynamic, I guess I was talking to someone, and he goes, what do you do? And I said, I'm in healthcare, and I consider myself a healthcare disruptor. I want to change healthcare. I want to do it differently. And I went into a tangent for 10 minutes. And I had coffee, so I was even more wound up. And then he's looking at me like I had three heads. And then he says to me, I was thinking of ending my life today because I don't see the point. I don't have a spouse. I don't have kids. He goes, but you're giving me hope. And obviously, as soon as you hear that from someone, grounds you a little bit. And then we exchanged numbers, and I told him, let's keep in touch. Let's keep in touch. There's a lot to live, right? There's a lot of reasons why we need to be here. And you might be going through some despair now, but better times are ahead, right? And the world will have you at your worst, but will also bring you the best. And it really grounded me, Marilyn, because it grounded me in the aspect of that there was two people in the same space, in the same place, physically, but mentally we couldn't be further apart. And that's how I feel about everyone who is in your position, that you potentially mentally, you are not in the same place that you might be physically, right? And it's your job to kind of ground yourself, literally and figuratively, because again, if you don't, then you're going to lose your identity. You're going to lose who you are, and a lot of people succumb to this. So I want to go to holistic wellness advisor and your role in that, because again, I might share the information of this gentleman with you. Because again, using holistic methods as a guiding light, he's someone who needs that. So how are you, again, using your own experience, and you're still going through your own grief and your own PTSD, how are you using that to advise others? Because that to me is incredible. Again, sometimes going through your own thing, and like you said, triggers, right? Triggers. So if you hear others going through the same stuff you went through, that might trigger it for you, but you're willing to take that. You're willing to take that opportunity or the responsibility and put yourself second because you are that devoted to stopping other people from having the days that you might have had in the past. That's amazing. So tell me about that.
Saving them the time of going through everything that I did, right? And it has caused me triggers when I'm speaking in groups. My favorite are nurses, because we go through so many things and we see so many different things, right? And to talk about when a trigger happens, how do we continue? How do we move forward from that, right? Holistic methods are necessary. And those are the things that I mentioned before, which is number one, meditation. And prayer is a form of meditation. Reciting things are a form of meditation. There's so many different types of meditation. A lot of people think, I can't do that, right? I can't listen to a tape of meditation, but there's so many different kinds, right, that you can do. So I teach them what the different kinds are and how they can implement them in their lives. And it doesn't take a long time. The biggest thing that I teach is that life is about two things, and that is choice and perspective. We can't change what happens to us. A lot of things, just like you mentioned, are going to happen to us. Every single day, something's going to happen. The only thing that we can change is how we respond to what's happening to us. Change your response. Your choices are based on that, on your perspective. So life is about two things. It's very simple life: perspective and choice.
The choice and the perspective and the response creates your thoughts, which creates your actions, which creates your reality.
Everything.
And transforms your life.
Everything. It's as simple as that.
Right. And I really, that to me comes full circle on Izzy's legacy, comes full circle on Marilyn, which is your thoughts were ravaged with psychological warfare as you went through PTSD, as you went through 9/11, as you went through your daughter's ordeal, as you have gone the last 2 decades, and probably as you do every day at work, right, with your own family members, as you went through the pandemic. Think about that. Your thoughts, your perspective, your choices were attacked, ravaged, potentially sometimes kidnapped by the doubts of what was to come during the next day. But you again, maintain that lioness mentality, that you are not going to be a victim of your thoughts, your actions, you are going to have full control of your thoughts. And it's that aspect, that resilience, that has given you the life that you have now. Again, it's amazing to see. It's amazing to see how much the adverse experiences that we go through help to kind of transform and build who we are, which almost at times makes me think, is it intentional? Do we have to go through these things? Because in hindsight, you wouldn't be who you are if you didn't. One question I have for you. What makes Marilyn Morales happy?
Family. Absolutely family. Being surrounded by family. Enjoying the simple things in life. That brings me joy.
And I asked you earlier, but I am so excited to talk to you. I think sometimes I ask you a question and then I ask you another question and then I forget about the first question. But the question I asked you before, I don't have the answer, is what is next for Marilyn Morales?
What is next? So my whole vision, especially as a young nurse, was always to be an educator. So when I talk about a holistic advisor, I'm just educating. I'm just teaching you.
There are so many people in the world, Marilyn, that are defined and that are profiled by their what they do for work. You do know that. There is one question that we ask people after we ask their name. You know what that question is? We ask, what do you do? Right? What do you do? And the reason that we ask someone, what do you do, after we ask their name, is because we have been indoctrinated and brainwashed to want to know what that person does so we can gauge how much level of respect we give them. And it's been a very superficial thing about human beings. And when I ask someone what they do, they tell me, I work at McDonald's, I pick up trash in the street, or they tell me, I'm a neurosurgeon. You are going to, the human mind is going to treat those two people differently, right? And it's a question that I detest. It's a question I don't like. And when somebody asks me what I do, I sometimes have fun with them. I sometimes tell them I am a professional pitcher for the New York Mets. Sometimes I tell them I own 2 Chick-fil-A's. I have fun with it because I want to create parity around the fact that you shouldn't be asking people what they do. You should be asking people what makes them. And you should be asking people 2 questions. What makes you happy? Because you get a genuine, authentic response that is unrehearsed. I just asked you what makes you happy. And without a doubt, without even a pause, you said family, right? Some people might say a car, a house, a watch, a girlfriend, a boyfriend. But the family is the biggest foundational support system that a human being can have. And those that have it are unstoppable in the workforce. And those that don't, unfortunately, are not. And then the other question I tell people to ask is, tell me how you grew up. Because it is your experience as you become an adolescent, youth, and an adult that really dictates who you're going to be later on in life. And I could tell that you're someone who the family you have now that makes you happy is a product of how you were raised. You were raised in a loving family. You were raised around people who cared about you. You were raised around people who, again, made you their champion. And you have carried that baton now, not only for Isabella, not only for yourself, not only for your kids, but for the fact of the matter that you have recognized that when you, again, influence the life of others, you indirectly influence your own world. And I think you've been able to use that as a way to therapeutically deal with the PTSD that continues to be a daily fight. But you're a fighter. You're a fighter. And I think if there was 2 words to define you, I would say you are not a fighter. Not a fighter. You are a gladiator. a gladiator. And what a gladiator did back in the Roman times, Marilyn, a gladiator fought till the death, because they would only be able to reach freedom if they fought, and 99% of them did not survive. The 1% that were able to fight and gain their freedom were able to live their life. You have become a gladiator who has fought so many demons in your own Colosseum. And your own Colosseum has been in your head. And you've been able to conquer and be the Spartacus of your own Colosseum. And you've been able to win and thrive. And we get the joy to be able to be the benefactors of a champion, a winner, a gladiator that is continuing to change the life of others. And it is a pleasure for us, for me, to have you on the podcast, to be, connected to someone who is so influential, and to understand that we are only seeing the early fruits of your influence. Because I have a feeling that your gladiatorship has a ton of years to go. And I hope to fight right along with you. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
And remember, we are changing the habits of yesterday by creating the new healthcare reality of tomorrow. Thanks so much, Marilyn. Appreciate you.